Back in 2006, Brent Morris called me up and asked if I'd be interested in making a presentation to Quaker Coronati Lodge in London. Now, it would be the rare Masonic researcher who would turn down an opportunity to make a presentation to the premier lodge of Masonic research. But I hesitated, not believing that I had any research projects in the go that would actually be of interest to such an august body. Nevertheless, Brent assured me that I should write a paper about Freemasons on the internet. 2 years later, I presented a paper in London that was subsequently published in the Ars Quater Coronatorum. It ran some 70-odd pages. I had to distill that down to a 20-minute talk, which meant, of course, that I left out all the footnotes and an awful lot of the details, a lot of the more tedious details. But nonetheless, the paper was published and is available through the Quaker Coronati website. So what you're going to hear this evening is basically me reading the paper that I presented at that time. So the tense is that of 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and of course some of the information will have changed and other information will have become available. Should be interesting for some of you, may put some of you to sleep, certainly put me to sleep occasionally writing it, but nevertheless, let's give it a few minutes. We'll be right back. And let's see what I have to say. Anderson's Book of Constitutions, 1723. There were 3, perhaps 400 in the first printing. But how many of them have survived? I'm compiling a catalogue of the extant copies. The United Grand Lodge of England has 14 in their archives. The Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon has 2. The Royal Museum in Victoria, British Columbia has 1. And I have a list of another 4. If you know the whereabouts of others, please drop me a line. This is a historical outline of Freemasons on the internet. Less a history than a chronology, less a chronology than a few notes. This paper may be viewed as an early attempt to outline what in time may become a proper history. One theme that stands out is the frustrating lack of documentation for something that exists mainly as text files. In the headlong rush from punch cards to DVDs, many files have been not so much as lost as left behind. The internet as a public forum has been with us for 30 years. Freemasons discussing and practicing Freemasonry have been online for most of those years. Even in the early days, the internet was a large place, and there were many communities that were barely aware of each other. There is opportunity for much further research. One of the first Masonic leaders to recognize the potential for Freemasonry was Allen E. Roberts, who wrote in 1983, "Has the time arrived for the Freemasons of the country to begin linking their computers through modems all over the country? Is it time to consider a Masonic bulletin board? Or should Freemasonry ignore this tremendous technological breakthrough as it has so many others?" Before anything else, there was email. Although there were individual Freemasons who had access to email in the 1960s and 1970s, it was not until the introduction of the telephone modem in 1977, bulletin board software in 1978, and commercial email and Usenet in 1979 that a Masonic conversation truly became possible. The internet can loosely be divided into email, file transfer sites, bulletin boards, mailing lists, e-zines, and chat rooms, Usenet newsgroups, and websites, blogs, and something called Second Life. Who was the first? Credited as the first Masonic bulletin board, Preston Burner's Hiram's Oasis was created in November of 1987. It's also been styled the Mother Masonic Bulletin Board. But Joseph Everett created the Ohio Masonic Bulletin Board list in the autumn of 1982, and there may be others. Bulletin boards were labors of love, requiring an outlay of personal funds for equipment and long-distance telephone charges, as well as a considerable investment of time. The fun and excitement of participating in a free-range and open-ended discussion group is apparent in the text files that have survived. Peter Trey came online in late 1978, joining Freemasonry in 1988. Within a year, he had created perhaps the first mailing list, the Masonic Digest. David Stites in California set up a section of a public file transfer protocol server in 1991. He later created a bulletin board called Masnet in 1992. But the earliest archived post about Freemasonry into a mailing list was not into a Masonic list, but into New Age Digest on 14th of December, 1984. The topic was overt government persecution of Masonic, Wiccan, and other occult groups in Europe. Special note should be made of the UK Mason list, created by Gordon Charlton and Chris White in 1995. This led to two initiatives, the E-Mason PIN and Internet Lodge number 9659. There have been at least two notable Masonic electronic magazines, Peter Trey's Masonic Digest, which ran from 1989 to 94, and Gordon Charlton's Masonry Universal ... which ran from 1995 to 1999. While the contents make interesting reading, also noteworthy was the inclusion of ASCII art in Masonry Universal ... an almost forgotten art form in which images are created with monospace letters. Described as the world's largest online text-based conferencing system, Usenet, established in 1979, allowed the creation of newsgroups or message boards on any topic. The Internet, especially Usenet, has long been described as anarchistic at best. The first great influx of newsgroup users began in 1993, when the Internet service provider, America Online, offered Usenet access to its customers. It was at this time that many Freemasons first became aware that anti-masonry was a contemporary issue and not just a historical footnote or fringe group obsession. The earliest extant reference to Freemasonry on Usenet is found in a message regarding the Book of Mormon, posted to the newsgroup net.religion on the 16th of September, 1983. There have been at least 19 newsgroups dedicated to some aspect of Freemasonry. Only one need be detailed here. The formation of alt.freemasonry was controversial. Believing Freemasons needed to meet the real world head-on, the unmoderated newsgroup alt.freemasonry was created by Christopher Kylan on the 19th of July, 1994. There were two other claimants to establishing the newsgroup, Ron Bootwell in Indiana and Ron Blaisdell in Michigan. There were technical reasons why all three of them may have created a newsgroup by that name, but Kylan's claim is the strongest. The future for alt.freemasonry as a forum for reasoned discussion appeared promising. By October, the bloom was off, and the anti-Masons, or at least the chronically argumentative, were circling. It took almost 3 years for the noise-to-signal ratio, as it was then termed, to become unbearable. Today, other than the tenacious posting of the Usenet Masonic FAQ, frequently asked questions, by Larry Williams, and the occasional plaintive query asking if there are any Freemasons lurking, in other words, reading but not posting, the group is currently populated by promoters of assorted conspiracy theories and non-Masonic sales schemes and scams. From the archives, it would appear that the newsgroup was most active in 2000 and 2001, with an anomalous flurry in 2004. The question of who created the first Masonic website is made difficult by technical definitions and incomplete records. Although the first graphic web browser wasn't released until 1994, CompuServe had its own software that allowed its customers to create and view a form of text web page. Ron Blaisdell's first Gopher site with hypertext markup language went live in February of 1993. Also in 1993, Peter Trey was uploading a dynamically updated results of an automated search of Usenet for Masonic references. Unfortunately, Trey did not maintain his own archives. Gary Dreyfus uploaded a page about Freemasonry in October of 1994, and that website is still there. Most jurisdictions eventually set up some policies or guidelines for lodge websites. There has been the rare incident when a Grand Master or other Grand Officer exercised his prerogative to control websites authored by lodges or individuals. Notable was the reaction of two Grand Masters in Florida to the article The Masonic Manifesto in the September 2005 issue of Tim Bryce's Freemasonry for the Next Generation. Bryce's website homepage currently reports that By order of the Grand Master of Florida, the site has been suspended. More colorful was the reaction of some members of Halcyon Lodge number 498 in Cleveland, Ohio. When they were told to remove questionable material from their website, they returned the lodge warrant. The details of this train wreck, as the late Theron Dunn described it, are not the issue. The point is that the internet allowed the entire online world to watch and comment. There have been other incidences. Real-world publishers quickly realized the value of posting electronic versions of their magazines and newspapers. Inspired by what he found online, the late Andrew Baracci of Sag Harbor, New York, began publication of American Mason magazine in 1996. In 2000, he registered AmericanMason.com, and he began uploading what he styled the world's first all-electronic Masonic magazine. Its main feature being a calendar of historical events in which Freemasons had played some role. Baracci attracted some controversy over his willingness to take texts from internet sources and reprint them, either without citation or without first gaining permission. There were attempts to create niche market Masonic sites. Brother Applebaum registered MasonicMemorials.com in 2003, dedicated to preserving the memories of Masons around the world. But with only 15 uploaded memorials by 2006, it was soon offline. Replacing it was Michael Johnstone's MasonicObituaries.com in 2007. Other niche market Masonic sites include MasonicPoetsSociety.com, created in 2004, MasonicMusic.org, created in 2000, WidowsSons.org, created in 2005 for Masons with motorcycles, and MasonicInc.com, created in 2005 to promote and display Masonic-themed tattoos. There are, of course, many, many others. Every recognized English-speaking Masonic jurisdiction now maintains some sort of website, although some jurisdictions did not come to the web easily. Alberta's decision to go online was made in 1997 by the then Grand Master Hugh Young, though at least one senior Grand Lodge officer opposed the action. The website was approved circuitously through the Finance Committee. Richard Barton created an unofficial website for the Grand Lodge of South Carolina in early 1996, which received a favorable review by the South Carolina Masonic Research Society, but it was ordered offline by his Grand Master in 1997. It was not until 2001 that an official website was created. Although the Grand Master for Virginia for 1997-98 had opposed a Grand Lodge web presence, Jack Kennard had already established the Virginia Masonic Information Net. There are, of course, many other stories to be told about every grand jurisdiction and their introduction to the web. Unsurprisingly, anecdotal evidence suggests that those jurisdictions that utilized the internet the earliest had a single strong-willed member who either was a Grand Lodge officer or who held the trust of senior Grand Lodge officers and was given considerable leeway to develop the web presence. Neither age nor length of membership appears to have been a factor, although early non-Masonic use of either the internet or computer technology does. Technology aside, the only real difference between a weblog or blog and a website is immediacy. Tom Acousti of Connecticut created the Tao of Masonry as a blog in 2006. Possibly due to his gentle humor and non-confrontational style, his blog has received no negative response from his Grand Lodge, and in fact it's now linked from his Grand Lodge's website. One of the higher profile blogs, Burning Taper, first posted in late 2005. His website gained its most visitors when he began writing critically about the Scottish Rite Southern jurisdiction's involvement in NASCAR in 2007. This was an issue that was receiving little coverage elsewhere. Of the other blogs, Chris Hodap and his Freemasons for Dummies blog, and the late Theron Dunn and his A Beacon of Masonic Light are noteworthy, both for their strong opinions and willingness to enter into debate, as well as their active involvement in real-world Freemasonry, and the depth and breadth of their knowledge. While many Grand Lodges, and individual Freemasons' websites were little more than vanity plates on the information superhighway, pictures, lists of officers, others recognized the educational potential. Bruno Gazzo in Genova, Italy, created Petrie Stone's Review of Freemasonry in 1996 and has attracted submissions by many knowledgeable Masonic authors and scholars. The Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon may be unique in developing a website that was focused more on Masonic education than on the workings of Grand Lodge. Established in 1995, today the website contains over 3,200 pages, of which less than 150 are about the Grand Lodge and its committees and its operations. In one respect, organized Freemasonry was slow to recognize the value of domain name registration. Many names, such as Mason, Masons, Masonic, Masonry, Freemason, in the top-level domains, .com, .net, .org, were snapped up by entrepreneurs. It is but good fortune that they were not snapped up by anti-Masons. Noteworthy is grandlodge.com, owned by buydomains.com. In 2006, it was for sale for $22,000. By 2007, the price had almost doubled. I don't think anyone's bought it. I haven't checked recently. Recognizing one of the most common misspellings, a Florida domain registrar named moniker.com registered and parked freemasonry.com in 2000 and masonary.com in 2001. National top domains have rarely befallen the same fate, with national registrars generally requiring some proof of a real-world use of the name. But freemason.ca was registered by a non-Mason in 2004 and is currently parked, I think. Take a look. We're online. The Grand Lodge of Russia registered freemasonry.ru, but freemasonry.us was registered in 2000 by an entrepreneur who has currently parked it as a link farm. Other names have also been lost. GoMasonry.com is now listed for sale for over $30,000. The early days of website development imposed a steep learning curve on those unfamiliar with a developing technology for which the ground rules were still evolving. There were those websites registered before fees were imposed, where the owners found themselves later unable to prove ownership. Other situations developed. Back to the Grand Lodge of British Columbia, they registered its first domain, bc-freemasonry.com, in 1995 through a local company owned by a Freemason. He registered it in his own name, not through any hidden motive, but because processing payment was simpler at the time. Unfortunately, his company was shortly thereafter absorbed by another company, and both the domain for the email address he had used when registering the domain and his real-world mailing address ceased to exist. This meant that 2 years later, the registrar Network Solutions, a misnomer if there ever was one, refused all attempts to transfer ownership to the Grand Lodge. Soon thereafter, bc-freemasonry.com became a portal for gambling sites, and today it's parked through an ISP in Florida. The Grand Lodge of Alabama had a similar experience, while the Grand Lodge of Minnesota had its own problems with a member who expected to profit by his ownership of their original URL. There are probably other stories. The newsgroups, or open fora, found on Usenet, provided Freemasons an opportunity to meet Freemasons from around the world. It also introduced them to a range of people who firmly claimed to be Freemasons, even if mainstream Freemasonry labeled them irregular. Perfectly pleasant, reasonable people who just happened to be women Freemasons, co-Masons, Grand Orient Masons, or other genus. It also opened Freemasons' eyes to the many varieties of Freemasonry worked under the banner of regularity. And it brought home to them the painful reality of hateful, malicious, agenda-written anti-Masonry, in a way that many of them had never had to deal with before. A few names, or pseudonyms, of the more egregious anti-Masons stand out and bear mentioning. Kevin McNeil Smith, which may still be a pseudonym, was then known as St. John the Sublime Reformer, and later Freemasonry Watch. He appeared in the Usenet archives in 1999, but he was posting much earlier under numerous aliases, cutting and pasting from others' posts in an often transparent attempt to create straw men for him to then knock down. Kenneth Wayne Mitchell, with well over 60 names, may hold the record for the most aliases, or sock puppets, as they were called at the time. With almost 4,500 archived posts into alt.freemasonry, Mike Restivo, a Masonic critic from Ontario, was one of the newsgroup's more vocal participants. Joining and quitting Freemasonry in 1991, he appeared in the CompuServe Masons Forum in 1995, but I don't think he's posted anywhere since 2005. Restivo, he was responsible for one of the more entertaining incidences in alt-Freemasonry's history, when he, unfamiliar with web page authoring, in early 2001 allowed visitors to his website to unwittingly enter a directory of adult-themed texts. Let's call it pornography. When Ed King posted this URL into alt.freemasonry as an example of Restivo's hypocrisy, Restivo responded angrily by claiming that he'd just been laying a trap for Freemasons. A review of posted messages clearly reveals Restivo's inability to sustain any sense of logic or coherence. It also pointed out King's inability to contain his glee in destroying Restivo's arguments. Freemasons who encountered anti-Masons online responded in a variety of ways. Some Freemasons were unable to distance themselves emotionally, and the newsgroup archives record many a Freemason who erupted in anger, irritation, and frustration at the personal attacks and obtuse logic. Kevin McNeil Smith, Freemasonry Watch, also established an early website. Although not the first anti-Masonic website, it is probably the oldest extant non-religious anti-Masonic website. Within his wild accusations and ad hominem attacks, Watchy, as he was then dubbed, displayed a persecution complex that was further fueled by a controversial event that became known as the Cookout. Theron Dunn discovered the Freemasonry Watch web forum soon after he became a Freemason in 2001. He began posting corrections to what he then assumed were honest errors of ignorance, immediately attacked in the forum, and then receiving what he believed to be spam, viruses, and other attempts to attack his computer from another forum participant. Dunn was then amenable to Bill McKelland's suggestion that a group of Freemasons should all post their favorite recipes into the forum at the same time. Over a 24-hour period in early September of 2003, some 20 Freemasons and perhaps a few non-Masons posted almost 2,000 recipes. Well, the software used for the forum was not designed to handle that sort of volume of traffic, and, depending on who you talk to, the forum was either taken offline or crashed. Watchy's website, press-freespeech.com, soon thereafter took his website offline. Dunn believed that his posting of the web host owner's personal contact information into a number of other fora was instrumental in having the site closed. It's more likely that Stephen Defoe's filing of a usage policy violation, this was for misuse of his and others' images and names, was the actual cause. Opinions were divided on the ethics and the effectiveness of the cookout. Dunn viewed what was in effect a spam bomb as a legitimate weapon against anti-Masonry. Others questioned that legitimacy and pointed out that, although rarely posting into other newsgroups, McNeil Smith continues to maintain his anti-Masonic website, which generally will appear in the top page of a keyword search for Freemasonry, and continues to run his own forum. It was not long until the idea was mooted for real-world lodges for Internet users, or some form of online lodge. Participants in the UK Mason list met informally in the real world. Reports vary, but John Belton recalls that it was at a late-night discussion at Charlton's home in March of 1996 that the idea of an internet lodge was first mooted. Less than 2 years later, the lodge was consecrated in 1998. The real-world meetings of Freemasons and members of the UK Masons list is only one example of many. Organized by Nick Alexander, Lunchtimers was formed in London in 1995 by participants in the CompuServe Masonry Forum. By autumn, the idea had spread to Boston, and soon at least 10 other cities around the world joined what was unofficially styled the International Lunchtimers Network. Prior to the Internet, Freemasons took their knowledge of contemporary Freemasonry from their Grand Lodge, what books they could find, and what travel they could enjoy. Interjurisdictional Masonic communication proceeded through lodge secretaries by way of their respective Grand Secretaries. It was slow, it was not efficient, and it was not always very effective. With the introduction of bulletin boards and Usenet, suddenly individual Freemasons could easily, immediately, discover for themselves that Freemasonry was not a monolithic whole, but came in many forms and ceremonies. Individual Freemasons were online talking with each other well before official Freemasonry. Freemasonry, or Freemasons, have always had a problem with openness. We're not a secret society, but we are a private society. In the main, Freemasons have never been comfortable discussing their problems in public. But the internet has made Freemasonry both a much closer and a much more public family. When Alex Harris was shouted down at the Grand Lodge of Alabama's annual communication in 1999, attempting to speak in favor of a motion to consider Prince Hall recognition, online Freemasons around the world heard about it within days. Whether it was an Ontario District Deputy Grand Master arrested for soliciting an undercover policeman, a Pennsylvania shrine official prosecuted for misappropriating over $1 million, the 2005 conviction of an Alabama Scottish Rite member for embezzlement, or the 2007 edict by the Grand Master of Arizona chastising the shrine. Information about Freemasons and Freemasons behaving badly, accurate or not, was posted where all Freemasons could read about it, as could the non-Masons and the anti-Masons. The internet allowed both the public and Freemasons to discover how poorly informed many of the brethren were. It could be said that the internet took official Freemasonry by surprise. There was no time to strike committees and write policy papers before individual Freemasons had begun uploading what they considered to be the truth about Freemasonry. Many of these myths and legends were later addressed on more carefully reasoned websites and in official pronouncements, but many of the errors, many of the mistaken information, remain on abandoned websites or cobwebs. The internet has also given a new forum for many bogus groups to claim Masonic authority, enabling anyone with the web design skills to proclaim a new Grand Lodge or declare himself a Masonic authority. Only one example will be dealt with today. The modern Rite of Memphis, and more importantly, the response it provoked, exemplifies the inflated importance that is often ascribed to affairs of the internet. What, from this remove, appears to have been little more than a conflict between a small Masonic study group without the humility to recognize that it was not treading new ground, and Grand Masters without the wisdom to recognize the same, became an online cause célèbre in 2005. Jeff Peace of Kentucky perhaps holds a unique place in the promotion of online bogus Freemasonry, being apparently unaware that although that was not what he thought he was doing, that was what he was saying. Creating riteofmemphis.com in 2000, and soon thereafter riteofmemphis.org, he announced that the Rite of Memphis is the fastest growing Masonic organization in the United States, and then claimed that perhaps this is due to its dynamic core of young, well-educated professionals with an average age of 35. Neither website lasted much past 2003. Peace knew nothing of the history or rites of the Rite of Memphis when he did this in early 1999, but after some research, discussion with perhaps a dozen other researchers, and several attempts to exemplify degrees, by 2001 he had decided that it just wasn't a viable system. But perhaps another set of degrees would do, the Rite of Rose Cross of Gold, the RRCG. So this was at a point when Peace claimed the modern Rite of Memphis was no more, and he found himself he found that the modern Rite of Memphis declared spurious, schismatic, irregular, and Masonically clandestine by several Grand Lodges. Peace believed that the 7 degrees of the RCG would appeal to younger Freemasons, attracting about a dozen members, and the subsequent wrath of regular Freemasonry. He may have been disingenuous when he claimed that it was intended to be more of a club than an order, that it was intended to support the lodge, not replace it, to be an intellectual movement, not a hierarchical association. He was little prepared to sympathize with or understand the complex web of esoteric societies that had preceded him in creating, reviving, and working many odd rituals, both pseudo-Masonic and otherwise. When the RCG failed to develop past this small discussion group, Peace then helped draft the United Grand Lodge of America's declaration and designed their website, although he denied any actual involvement in the group. He estimated that by the end of 2006, the Confederation of Sovereign Lodges under the UGLA, United Grand Lodge of America, included some 375 members. He registered several domains, tracingboard.com in 2000, rrcg.org in 2003, sovereignsanctuary.com in 2004, uglofa.org in 2005, grandlodgeusa.org in 2006. There may be others. The website, tracingboard.com, was little more than the usual collection of Masonic information, much gleaned from other websites, until sometime in early 2004 when Peace announced that he would be closing the site. In May it was back. In September it was closed. Later it was back. By early 2005, the homepage read, Grand Lodge Accepted Freemason Established 1717, with a redirect link to rrcg.org. By that summer, it was back as Freemasonry 101, and by April 2007, it announced this site is not connected to or with any Grand Lodge or form of Freemasonry. Later that year, it began promoting what it referred to as traditional cosmopolitan Freemasonry. What form of bogus Freemasonry is contained under all these names and its short history would make a fascinating study. Its only importance here is to exemplify the will-o-wisp that can be the internet. In 2006, at the Multi-State Council of Delegates at the United Grand Lodge of America headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, possibly a local coffee shop, we won't really know, the United Grand Lodge of America was formed after brothers in Georgia were erased from their blue lodges by the Grand Lodge of Georgia. Whether there was anyone present other than the three principals is not at issue. Whether Cooksey demitted from his Alabama lodge over incidences of racism and character assassination is also not at issue. The point is that what might have remained a local non-issue became known to the online Masonic community and the public at large through blogs such as burningtaper.blogspot.com and the UGLA's own website, uglofa.org, anonymously created in 2005. It was also claimed online that the UGLA was formed in Atlanta in December 2005. The formation date is only of importance to the principals. The point made is that whatever value the immediacy of the internet creates, it is mitigated by the inaccuracies that it promotes. Highlighting the challenge of tracking such groups, the United Grand Lodge of America registered grandlodgeusa.org in 2006, but in 2007 the name was changed to the Grand Orient of the United States of America. Almost a defining characteristic of all these websites was the absence of real-world contact information, names, or meeting places, the bricks and mortar of Freemasonry. While the United Grand Lodge of England has expressed its belief that the regular Grand Lodge of England is composed of little more than a handful of members, it's developed a much-discussed online presence since its 2005 creation. If this was a history of irregular Freemasonry, there are many questions that would need to be answered. In a history of Freemasons online, they simply highlight the fact that without the internet, no one outside of their own circles would probably have ever heard of any of these people. While these many websites and the organizations or individuals behind them are an irritation, Theron Dunn perhaps summarized it best. The Grand Lodges are watching these startups not with fear or trembling, and certainly not with benign amusement. They do see it as a symptom of a problem that many are addressing. The internet has also given a forum to any Freemason who, justifiably or not, may have quarreled with his lodge or Grand Lodge. While some created their own new groups in the real world, Others wished to stay within regular Freemasonry, but just wanted to see change. The recent history of the Grand Lodge of West Virginia, resolutions brought before Grand Lodge by Most Worshipful Brother Frank Haas in 2006, decisions made by Most Worshipful Brother Charles Coleman in 2007, edicts issued by Most Worshipful Brother Charles Montgomery in 2008, and the conflicts contained within these are only noteworthy insofar as issues that at one time would have been known only by the principals or only within the jurisdiction, but they are now bandied about the internet, where anyone and everyone can read about them. Starting with the Grand Lodge of Connecticut's recognition of Prince Hall Freemasonry in 1989, 8 other American jurisdictions had followed suit before it became an internet cause célèbre. But it was arguably the internet that educated Freemasons about an issue many of them had never known existed. Perhaps it was simply time, but the role of the internet in promoting the mutual recognition of Prince Hall affiliated jurisdictions in the late 1990s cannot be ignored. Paul Bessel's list of Prince Hall recognitions, complete with historical maps, was a valuable resource in providing up-to-date information. Freemasons' fondness for listing their more notable members found new life on the internet, and with these lists came the errors. Subsequent research corrected the errors, but the damage was done, and to this day, some of these errors continue to be found on the cobwebs, abandoned websites of otherwise well-meaning brethren. One error had a wider impact outside Freemasonry. It's unclear where it was first posted online, but its origin can most probably be laid at the doorstep of former Freemason Jim Shaw, who claimed that the Reverend Billy Graham was a 33rd degree Freemason. Sometime in 1996, at least 2 Masonic websites included the Reverend Billy Graham on their list of famous Freemasons. Now, the appearance of Graham's name on official lists of Freemasons had been a red flag to those evangelical Christians who were both anti-Masonic and felt that the Reverend Graham wasn't Christian enough. But the removal of his name incited a further frenzy. Rather than accepting that some well-meaning Freemasons had made an honest mistake, this was now viewed as proof positive that there was a cover-up. One last aspect of the internet should be noted: virtual worlds. At bottom, simply chat rooms with interactive three-dimensional graphics. Among the most popular virtual worlds are Second Life, There, and Yville. In early 2008, there were 8 clearly defined Masonic groups in Second Life, with names such as Second Life Masonic Lodge, Blue Lodge, Second Light Masonic Lodge No. 1, Grand Lodge of Freemasons. Membership varied, with the smallest of only 3 and the largest with about 32. None of the groups claimed to be tiled, but most of them claimed to be populated by Freemasons. The internet has been a boon to Freemasonry. Many jurisdictions have found that a growing number of their candidates are coming from that group of young, educated, intelligent computer users who would possibly have never found their way to Freemasonry without the help of the web. Like all technology, though, it is a two-edged sword. These are but a few notes on the history of Freemasons online. I trust it will encourage lodges, jurisdictions, and their members to compile their own histories, perhaps filling in the many lacunae I have encountered. I also trust that my notes will inspire an outpouring of corrections and amendments.
Over 200 years ago, some 10 years before the Lodge of Reconciliation met, someone wrote out perhaps what is the earliest example of what became the emulation ritual. Sold at auction in the 1880s to a Freemason who then moved to Vancouver, his son-in-law lent the manuscript to Lionel Vibert, who transcribed it in 1932. And then, in 1949, it was given to Western Gate Lodge No. 48 here in Vancouver. 2 other transcriptions were made, one locally and one in Quebec. Vibert's is with the Harry Carr collection in the Dallas Scottish Rite Library. The others are with the National Archives of Canada. Copies are also in the Quator Coronati Lodge collection. Today, the original of the Vancouver manuscript is missing. If you have any information regarding its whereabouts, please contact me.
I ended my 2008 outline of Freemasons Online by noting my expectations of an outpouring of corrections and amendments. There have been surprisingly few, but they should be noted. I reported that the tenacious poster of the Alt-Freemasonry FAQ in my published paper was Worshipful Brother Larry Holbrook. In fact, Worshipful Brother Larry Williams is a member of Holbrook Lodge in Oregon. My apologies. So far, only one other misunderstanding has been laid at my door. When David Doherty criticized Mark Tabert in a blog posting in 2006, it appeared that he was criticizing Tabert's call for a central repository of online Masonic information. But in fact, he was upset about the new Washington Monument Library's access policy. A bit of a historical update. I've since learned that Phoenix Masonry was created by David Letellier in response to a Grand Master in Florida refusing to pay the sum of $20 a month for web hosting. When Letellier then set up Phoenix Masonry to put out pictures of his collection of museum pieces, he was then expelled for creating the website. The Global Fraternal Network has been moved. Do a web search if you want to find it. The Scottish Rite Masonic College, founded through the Valley of Chicago in the mid-1990s, was an early attempt at an online program of education, but it foundered within 4 years. Another short-lived attempt to promote Freemasonry was the Freemason University out of Morton Grove, Illinois. There are archives of it in 2001, and it doesn't appear to have survived either. I mentioned the online magazine North Carolina Mason in my original paper. Since then, I've located a text file pushing its original publishing dates back to early 1993. Brother Gregory Stewart, who posts the blog Masonic Traveler out of California, published a book in 2009. Congratulations, Brother Stewart. The Burning Taper is still published anonymously by Widow's Son. He was offline for the end of 2010 and most of 2011, battling necrotizing fasciitis, successfully, I must say. Congratulations to you as well. The blog, Freemasonry for Dubbies, continues to be a timely source for Masonic news. Chris Hodap, who posts the blog, is also on the mend after what he termed his little cancer adventure. Glad to hear that. It will never be possible to mention every website, but a few have come to my attention since my paper was published. Masonic-lodge.info had come online in 2002. It continues to maintain a regularly updated list of Grand Lodge, Lodge, and Masonic information sites. What has changed since I gave my paper in 2008? Well, there are a lot more websites. Some Grand Lodges have taken advantage of the web and designed attractive, inviting, information-laden websites. Other Grand Lodges or Grand Masters continue to fear what they cannot understand or control. Nothing has changed there. Social media, such as Facebook and Twitter, were not mentioned in my 2008 paper. Today, both are widely used by Freemasons, and even a few Grand Lodges are encouraging their principal officers to twit, but not in lodge. The use of handheld devices in lodges have become so problematic that several Grand Lodges have had to issue edicts or at least policies restricting their use. The use of YouTube continues to grow, and of course the importance of such programs as the worldwide exemplification of Freemasonry lecture series. This one right now. Shouldn't be overlooked. People like moving pictures. My original paper is posted on the Quater Coronati Correspondence Circle website. As I receive corrections and additional information, an updated version will periodically be uploaded to the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon website. I have to say, though, I have not been collecting further information on Freemasons on the internet. I've arbitrarily chosen the period of 1978 to 2008 as my research topic. I won't be adding to my paper to keep it current. Face made for radio.